Hey YouTubers, it's me, Lonnie Clark. That's for art. Beyond Extinction Love. I'm going to read another little bit of Black Like Me by John Howard Griffin. I think I left off at page 102, but I'm going to start at the top of 102. That's the beginning of November 24th, 1959. I hitchhiked back up towards the swamp country between Mobile and Montgomery. It was a cool day. I walked some miles before a large, pleasant-faced man halted his light truck and told me to get in. When I opened the door, I saw a shotgun propped up against the seat next to his knee. I recalled it was considered sport among some elements in Alabama to hunt nigs, and I backed away. "Come on," he laughed. "It's for hunting deer." I glanced again at his florid face, saw him looking decent, and climbed into the leather seat beside him. "Do you have any luck getting rides through here?" he asked. "No, sir. You're my first ride since Mobile." I learned he was a married man, 53 years old, father of a family now grown and grandfather of 2 children. He was certainly, by the tone of his conversation, an active civic leader and a respected member of the community. I began to hope that I had encountered a decent white. "You married?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Any kids?" "Yes, sir, 3. "You got a pretty wife?" "Yes, sir." He waited a minute, then with a lightness, paternal amusement, "She ever had it from a white man?" I stared at my black hands, saw the gold wedding band, and mumbled something meaningless, hoping he would see my reticence. He overrode my feelings, and the conversation grew more salacious. He told me how all the white men in the region craved colored girls. He said he hired a lot of them, both for housework and in his business. "And I guarantee you, I've had it in every one of them before they ever got on the payroll." Oh my God. A pause. I silenced above the humming tires on the hot tub road. Excuse me, I'm going to read that again. I was kind of taken aback by that paragraph. It kind of caught me by surprise. He told me how all the white men in the region craved colored girls. He said he'd hired a lot of them for both housework and in his business. "And I guarantee you, I've had it in every one of them before they ever got on the payroll." A pause. Silent above humming tires on the hot top road. "What do you think of that?" "Surely some refused," I suggested cautiously. "Not if they want to eat or feed their kids," he snorted. "If they don't put out, they don't get a job." I looked out the window to the tall pine trees rising on either side of the highway. Their turpentine odor mingled with the soap smells of the man's khaki hunting clothes. "You think that's pretty terrible, don't you?" he asked. I knew I should grin and say, "Why no, it's just nature," or some other disarming remark to avoid provoking him. "Don't you?" He insisted pleasantly. "I guess I do." "Why, hell, everybody does it. Don't you know that?" "No, sir." "Well, hell, they sure as do. We figure we're doing you people a favor to get some white blood in your kids." The grotesque hypocrisy slapped me as it does all Negroes. It is worth remembering that when the white man talks of the Negro's lack of sexual morality, or when he speaks with horror about mongrelization and with fervor about racial purity. Mongrelization is already a widespread reality in the South. It has been exclusively the white man's contribution to the Southern way of life. His vast concern for racial purity obviously does not extend to all races. Later, I encountered many whites who freely admitted the same practices my companion described. In fairness, however, other Southern whites roundly condemned it and claimed it was not typical as my informant suggested. None denied that it was widespread. The aspect of Southern, this aspect, ooh, sorry about that. Sorry about that, you guys. This aspect of Southern life does not hit the newspapers because, as my companion said, Alabama's nigger women are good about that. They won't never go to the cops nor tell on you. It was obvious what would happen if one of them tried it. As I feared it would, my lack of cooperation nettled the driver. He took my silence rightly for disapproval. "Where are you from?" he asked. "Texas." "What are you doing down here?" "Just traveling around trying to find jobs." "You're not down here trying to stir up trouble, are you?" "Oh, God, no." "You start stirring up these niggers and we sure as hell know how to take care of you." "I don't intend to." "Do you know what we do to troublemakers down here?" "No, sir." "We either ship 'em off to the pen or kill 'em." He spoke with a tone that sickened me, casual, merciless. I looked at him. His decent blue eyes turned yellow. I knew that nothing could touch him to have mercy once he decided a Negro should be taught a lesson. The immensity of it terrified me, but it caught him up like a lust now. He entertained it, his voice unctuous with pleasure and cruelty. The highway stretched deserted through the swamp forest. He nodded towards the solid wall of brush flying past our windows. "You can kill a nigger and toss him into that swamp, and no one will ever know what happened to him." "Yes, sir." I forced myself to silence, forced myself to picture this man in his other roles. I saw him as he played with his grandchildren, as he stood up in church with open hymnal in hand, as he drank a cup of coffee in the morning before getting dressed, and then shaved and talked with his wife pleasantly about nothing, as he visited with friends on the front porch on Sunday afternoons. That was the man I had seen when I first got into the truck. The amiable, decent American, all in all his features. This was the dark tangent in every man's belly, the sickness, the coldness, the mercilessness, the lust to cause pain or fear through self-power. Surely not even his wife or closest friends had ever seen him like this. It was a side he would show no one but his victims, or those who connived with him. The rest, what he must really be, a husband, devoted father, and respected member of the community, I had to supply with my imagination. He showed me the lowest, and I had to surmise the highest. His face was set hard in an attempt to regain his equilibrium when he pulled off the main highway and stopped on a dirt road that led into the jungle. We had engaged in a subtle battle of which I think he had only become aware. He needed to salvage from it something. "This is where I turn off. I guess you want to stick to the highway." I thanked him for the ride and opened the door. Before I could get out, he spoke again. "I'll tell you how it is here. We'll do business with you people. We'll sure as hell screw your women. Other than that, you're just completely off the record as far as we're concerned. And the quicker you people get that through your heads, the better off you'll be." "Yes, sir." I stepped out and closed the door. He drove down the side road, scattering fine gravel behind his wheels. I listened until his truck was out of hearing distance. The heavy air of evening, putrid with swamp rot, smelled fragrant. I walked across the highway, sat on my duffel, and waited for another car. None came. The woods issued no sound. I felt strangely safe, isolated, alone in the stillness of dusk turning to night. First stars appeared in darkening skies, still pale, and the earth's heat escaped upward. My mouth was dry and my stomach began to ache for food. I realized I had not eaten or had a drink of water all day. Cold surrounded me rapidly. I got up and began to walk along the highway in the darkness. It was better to walk than to freeze. My duffel pulled heavily on my arms, and I knew I could not go farther without food and rest. I wondered at the lack of traffic on Alabama highways. No cars passed. My footsteps on the roadside gravel sloughed an echo from the walls of the trees and the brush. After a while, a light flickered among the foliage. I hurried forward around the curve of the highway until I saw it come forward from an isolated service station at the top of a hill. When I arrived opposite, I stood for some time across the highway and watched. An elderly white couple sat inside, surrounded by shelves of groceries and auto supplies, by soft drink machines and cigarette dispensers. They looked kind, gentle, and I framed in advance what I should say to allow any fears they might have a large Negro appearing out of the night, and to convince them that they should sell me food and drink. Perhaps I might even ask them to let me spend the night on the floor there. The woman saw me approaching past the lighted gasoline lamps. I whistled them to give them warning. She met me at the door. I felt an outgush of warm air and heard country music from a radio when she opened. I glanced through the glass to see the man seated in a chair, his ear close to a small radio. "Pardon me, ma'am," I said, nodding low. "I'm traveling through to Montgomery. I got stranded on the highway and can't seem to get a ride. I'm wondering if I could buy something to eat and drink." She studied me with suspicion, her eyes hard with wrinkles. "We're closing up," she said, and stepped back to shut the door. "Please," I pleaded, not needing to feign objection. "I've been without food and water all day." I could see her hesitate, her caution and repugnance struggling against the instincts of common decency. She obviously wanted to refuse me. She was also undoubtedly afraid not only of me, but of having someone drive up for gasoline and seeing her wait on me. But I recalled the driver's statement, "We do business with you people." I waited. The night was cold, the country lonely. Even animals had to eat and drink. "Well, I guess it's all right," she said with disgust. She turned back into the room. I stepped inside and closed the door. Neither of them spoke. The old man glanced up at me from a clean-seamed face devoid of all expression. I bought an orange drink and a package of cracker sandwiches. The atmosphere was so unhospitable, I stepped outside where they could watch me and drank the orange. When I finished, I returned the empty bottle and quickly bought another. The store had little to offer in the way of food that I could manage. The only 2 cans of sardines had no keys, and the owner stared at the floor, nodding no when I asked if she had a can opener. I bought a fried pie, a loaf of bread, and 5 Milky Way bars. The woman stood in front of the gas heater and picked the dirt from under her thumbnail with a third finger on her other hand. When I mumbled my thanks, she was so absorbed in her task that she acknowledged my departure only by staring at her hands with a deeper frown. The husband stuck the money in his shirt pocket. I walked down the highway into the darkness again, carrying both duffel bags in my left hand and feeding myself the tasteless pineapple fried pie with my right. A distant hum behind me caught my attention. I turned to see the yellow glow on the road's horizon. It grew stronger and the headlights appeared. Though I dreaded riding with another white man, I dreaded more staying on the road all night. Stepping into full view, I waved my arms. An ancient car braked to a halt, and I hurried to it. To my great relief, the reflections from the light dash showed me the face of a young Negro man. We discussed my problem. He said he lived back in the woods but had 6 kids and 2 rooms. He wouldn't even have a bed to offer me. I asked him about some other house in the area that I might rent a bed. He said there was none other better than what he had to offer. However, he could find no other solution. You can't stand out here all night. If you don't mind sleeping on the floor, you're welcome to come with me, he said finally. I don't mind sleeping on the floor, I said. I just wouldn't want to put you through any trouble. As we drove several miles down a lane in the forest, he showed me a sawmill worker, and he told me he was a sawmill worker and never made enough to get out from under his debts. Always when he took his check to the store, he owed a little more than the check could cover. He said it was the same for everyone else, and indeed, I had seen the pattern throughout my travels. Part of the Southern white's strategy is to get the Negro in debt and keep him there. It makes it hard, doesn't it? I said. Yeah, but you can't stop, he answered quickly. That's what I tell the men on the mill. Some of them are willing to just sit there. I told them, okay, so you're going to give up just because you get no butter with your bread? That's no way to act. Go ahead and eat the bread, but work, and maybe someday we'll have butter to go with it. I tell them we sure ain't going to get it any other way. I asked him if we could not get together with some of the others and strike for wages. He laughed with real amusement. Do you know how long we'd last doing something like that? Well, if you stuck together, they couldn't kill all of you. They could damn sure try, he snorted. Anyways, how long could I feed my kids? There's only a couple of stores in 20 miles. They'd all cut off our credit and refuse to sell to us. Without money coming in, none of us could live. He turned off the lane and into a rutted path that led through some dense underbush up to a small knoll. The headlights fell on a shanty of unpainted wood, patched at the bottom with a rusting Dr. Pepper sign. Except for the voices of children, a deep silence hung over the place. The man's wife came to the door and stood silhouetted against the pale light of a kerosene lamp. He introduced us. Though she appeared embarrassed, she asked me in. The subdued babble of children mounted to excited shouts of welcome. They ranged in age from 9 years to 4 months. They were overjoyed to have company. It must be a party. We decided it was. Supper was a makeshift table. It consisted entirely of yellow beans cooked in water. The mother prepared mashed beans and canned milk for the baby. I remembered the bread and offered it as my contribution to the meal. Neither parent apologized for the meagerness of the food. We served ourselves on plastic dishes from the table and sat where we could find places, the children on the floor with a spread-out newspaper for a tablecloth. I congratulated them on such a fine family. The mother told me they had been truly blessed. Ours are all in good health. When you think of so many people with crippled or blind or not right children, you just have to thank God. I praised the children until the father's tired face animated with pride. He looked at the children the way others look at rare paintings or treasured gems. Closed into the 2 rooms, with only the soft light of kerosene lamps, the atmosphere changed. The outside world, the outside standards disappeared. They were somewhere beyond the vast darkness. In here, we had all we needed for gaiety. In here, we had all we needed for gaiety. We had shelter, some food in our bellies, the bodies and eyes and affections of children who were not yet aware of how things were. And we had treats. We cut the Milky Way bar into thin slices for dessert. In a framework of nothing, slices of Milky Way becomes a great gift. With almost rabid delight, the children consumed them. One of the smaller girls salivated so heavily the chocolate dribbled syrup from the corner of her mouth. Her mother wiped it off with her fingertip and unconsciously, from my yearning, put it up to her own mouth. After supper, I went outside with my host to help him carry the water from the makeshift boarded well. A near full moon shone above the trees, and a chill penetrated as though brilliance strengthened it. We picked our way carefully through fear of snakes down a faint footpath to the edge of the trees to urinate. The moon-speckled landscape exhaled its night rustlings, its truffle odor of swamps. Distantly, the baby cried. I listened to the muffled rattle of our waters against the damp leaf loam. A fragment of memory returned. The recollection of myself as a youngster reading Lillian Smith's Strange Fruit. Her description of the Negro boy stopping along the lonely path to urinate. Now, years later, I was there in the role foreign to my youth's wildest imaginations. I felt more profoundly than ever before the totality of my Negroness, the immensity of its isolating effects. The transition was complete from the white boy reading a book about Negroes in the safety of his white living room, from an old Negro man in the Alabama swamps, his existence nullified by men, but reaffirmed by nature in his functions and in his affections. Let me see. I see we're at 22 minutes. This goes on for quite a bit, like a lot more. Wow. So I'm not going to finish. I'm going to stop here because this is page 110. It goes on to 120. So I'm going to stop here on page 110 because I think that's enough. It's been 22 minutes. So thanks to whoever it is. There's one person who is listening to all of these, and I really do appreciate that. And I hope that I make an effort to read okay. So I'm going to post again through the weekend, and look, we're getting through it. So I'm glad you're enjoying it. Talk to you again. Bye.